I know what you're thinking, punk. You're thinking, did he fire 6 shots or only 5? And now, to tell you the truth, I forgot myself in all this excitement. But being this is a .44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world, and will blow your head clean off, you've got to ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
Welcome to Filmstrip, featuring Ron.
It'll be my word against yours.
And Jay.
That's to know.
These podcasts will be spoiler-filled as we discuss the plots, characters, and themes.
Welcome to Filmstrip. I'm Jay.
And I'm Ron.
And this is our review of Sudden Impact, starring Clint Eastwood, Sandra Locke, Pat Hingle, and Paul Drake. Directed by Clint Eastwood, released in 1983 on a budget of $22 million, made over $67 million at the box office. So 7 years since the last film, The Enforcer, which both of us thought didn't work and pretty well just derailed the Dirty Harry series. Clint comes back to this one, and we don't do a lot of IMDb trivia here. We do these shows and stuff, but I did find one thing that I just found fascinating and I had never read before, was that the entire reason this exists is because of a Warner Brothers survey, and then people saying they'd love to see Clint Eastwood play Dirty Harry again, and a phone call and a lunch later, there's a movie.
A phone call and a lunch and probably $10 million.
Probably so. That, and I get to direct my girlfriend at the time, because not to get into the Inquirer part of Hollywood, but the Eastwood Locke duo is responsible for a lot of things that happened for a while until they turned to guns on each other.
You mean the Eastwood Locke power couple?
Yeah, which is really more like the power guy who, when he took it all away, ended. I mean, have you heard of her lately? I haven't.
So you mean something bad happened to the first celebrity couple to get a portmanteau? I mean, weren't they called Eastlock?
I didn't know that, but you know what? That works. I totally buy that. So. Now, but I think there were lawsuits in the 90s. I think eventually she settled. They wound up settling out of court or something like that. I don't remember. So yeah, because the jury, I do remember now, the jury was going to rule in her favor, but before they came back, Eastwood's party came out with a settlement, and then that's the end of that. So she is a cancer survivor, so I won't give her a hard time too much, because good on her for doing that. But yeah, they Sandra Locke and Clint Eastwood were together for about 14 years there, starting in the mid 70s. So right around the time of The Enforcer, and then all the way up through 1989, which would have been the last Dirty Harry movie. So that we'll get to next time. But no, Sudden Impact, brought back. And the thing about this one, I think, is probably the lasting legacy is the "Go ahead, make my day" line, right? Like that's the we've talked about the lines of the film, right? The man's got to know his limitations, and some of the other things. This is the most powerful handgun in the world, and then I don't know what the hell the last line was. Viva la revolution or whatever. But this one, it was definitely "Go ahead and make my day," and we'll talk about it when we get there. But the thing that amazes me about that is that got held on to. It was really a throwaway thing that introduced it.
Yeah, it's weird, the things that stick with pop culture. I think everybody just assumes that's in the first movie, because that's usually where, when I hear people misquote it, it's always like, "This is the most powerful handgun in the world. Did I fire 5 shots? Or did I fire 6? Go ahead, make my day."
That's a pretty good Clint impression, by the way. I did a golf clap on that. That was good. I do. Yeah, I've heard that so many times. What didn't Ronald Reagan throw that out in a speech at one time?
I think he did.
So,
Mr. Gorbachev, make my day.
Yeah, tear down that wall.
This is the most powerful handgun in the world.
Where's my Jello? But
it's jelly beans, damn it.
I think he was in that was in the Land of Confusion video from Genesis. But I mean, now pop culture is just mashed together in a big peanut butter and jelly sandwich in my head as I stare down the barrel of 40 and think about this. But I will say this now: this was the first Dirty Harry movie I ever saw. I saw this on cable. I think I was probably 10 or 11, and I have no idea how I got to watch this. Probably because no one was looking, and latchkey kids. And I remember thinking at the time this was the coolest movie I'd ever seen. Dirty Harry was awesome. He had the 44 Auto Mag, which we'll talk about that, the semi-automatic handgun, and I just thought this was so neat. I paid zero attention to the subject matter of it, but some years later in college, I bought a VHS of it for like $5 at Walmart. It was when DVDs had come out and VHSs were just flying off shelves for nothing. And I, resisting the movement, bought a lot of VHS tapes. I was also very poor at the time, so that's what I did. And I remember owning this, and I think I only watched it once. And now I haven't seen it since. And now having come back to it, over a decade later, I think I know why. This is an ugly film. This is tough.
It's well, as I said to you in a text message, I said it's the worst of 70s sleaze meets the worst of 80s fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Because this movie could not just it turned into 1983 really quickly in San Francisco.
Yeah,
like it just looks like a completely different town.
And it was. I think it was. I really do. I think the relic of the 70s and the 60s and the 70s and everything that had changed in America, and particularly in San Francisco, really changed the look of this. And this one, there were small protests about this. The next one, we'll talk about the fact that there were major outcries about why are we still making Dirty Harry movies in San Francisco. But I don't think you're wrong there. The aesthetic feels off. And again, you talk about the 70s sleaze part of it. We'll get into that and stuff. I think that's a good assessment. This is as sleazy a movie as The Enforcer tried to be.
It's sleazier than The Enforcer because it's more successful.
Yeah,
at being gross. It's like Clint Eastwood saw I Spit on Your Grave, and it's like, I think we need that in the next Dirty Harry movie.
Either he or Sandra Locke must have been fans of that, because I don't know. And the thing is, like, it says,
I really doubt Sandra Locke was a fan of that movie.
Well,
now Clint, I could make the argument that Clint was a big fan of that movie.
Well, that's probably true, but I mean, you've got seasoned screenwriters here. I mean, Charles Pierce wrote The Town That Dreaded Sundown. I love that movie. That's a fantastic film, and always had this sort of Southern couture, and had worked on a lot of stuff. Was friends with Clint, but you had other writers. You had 3 or 4 different people working on this. I mean, it's hard to tell whose hand is on what.
That's because to me it feels like two movies awkwardly like mashed together.
Yeah, it does. I mean, there are plot lines sort of all over the place.
Yeah. Also, let's not forget Charles Pierce is the guy who did the classic Boggy Creek 2 and The Legend Continues about a Bigfoot in Arkansas.
Hey, you can't beat a Bigfoot movie in the South in the 70s. So,
he must have used his Dirty Harry movie to make his Dirty Harry money to make that flick. Cause
yeah.
But
he is the one that we can credit the "Go ahead and make my day" line to. That it was his line, and he said it was something his dad used to say to him when they would push the buttons. So I was like, well, hey, you write what you know. So
yeah, it's definitely another Eastwood crony flick, because some of the other credited writers, Earl E. Smith. I think. No, is it either one of them? Let me take a look.
Yeah, Earl Smith, yeah.
Yeah, he was a crony, and Joseph Stinson, who's also credited with the screenplay, wrote Heartbreak Ridge for Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, which is not a bad film. Doesn't necessarily hold up, but it's not a bad film. It's watchable in some ways. It's maybe the most gravelly voice Clint's had until he did Gran Torino years later. So, which that's by nature. So, I think before we get any further, though, you need to give us a plot, because I'll just tell people now, there's no way we're going to walk through this piece by piece like maybe we did some of the other ones. It doesn't really unfold that way either. So we'll just have to talk about everything that happens. But we've set it up enough, Ron. Tell people what Sudden Impact's all about.
Sure. After several run-ins with the local crime boss, Dirty Harry Callahan is sent to a small oceanside town to investigate a series of brutal shootings, which we'll get into later. Harry meets a local artist, Jennifer, who's hiding a dark secret, and a .38 revolver in her purse. Jennifer and her sister were brutally raped a few years previously by a group of men, leaving the sister comatose and Jennifer out for revenge via bullets. As Harry investigates the killings and that attack from years ago, he learns one of the attackers is the son of the local police chief, which explains why the cops have done little on the case. Finally, Harry learns that Jennifer is the killer, and when attacked by the leader of the old group again, Harry dispenses his unique brand of justice and frames the killings on the perpetrator, allowing Jennifer to finally be at peace as the credits roll.
And they walk off into the boardwalk together. Yeah, that's a good way to sum it up. Let's start with the opening there, though, with what sets the mood and what I feel like is the weirdest setup to any of these films that we've had. Harry Callahan and the mob are having trouble to the point that they run him off the road, shoot his car up, and he magically disappears to come around the next corner and shoot them all.
Right. Yeah.
Now, at this point, Clint's in his 50s. And I want to say this. We talked about how for a man in his late 30s and in his 40s, he was quite spry. He did a lot of stunts and stuff. Well, those days are not happening right now. He does not look like he wants to move. He looks stiff, and he looks bored.
He very much walks like a guy who's in his mid to late 50s at this point. He's clearly... all those years of jumping around in his 40s have taken a toll on him. All those years he did his own stunts on the first Dirty Harry, and following movies. He moves like a dude who doesn't have a lot of knee cartilage left.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and he noticed by the way he just sort of stands and just kind of randomly sort of fires that gun. Like there's nothing to it. He shoots these guys up, and of course, and I feel like we're being dropped into a story, and I'm like, what's happening now?
I think my favorite part of his advanced age is the fact that you can literally see the actors waiting for their cue to fall over and be shot. Because they're waiting for Clint to get into position to shoot them.
Exactly. And all of this is happening, we should say, and I don't know why. I felt like this was Milius writing again. We have a courtroom scene where he walks in wearing a pair of gargoyle sunglasses. Ridiculous looking, by the way, on his face. I ripped that off of, I don't know if you saw the Terminator or what, decided to do that. But he's sitting in the courtroom, and you have the atypical, caricature liberal judge that throws out the case because of unlawful search and seizure and another one of Callahan's reckless things, and the mob boss gets let loose, or the murderer gets let loose, and he has that little run-in with the punk in the elevator way, and then all of a sudden he starts getting shot up by the mobsters, and I don't know, it's just sort of these random things happening, and I feel what you're saying is that it feels like movie by committee. It's like, well, we gotta work in some random shooting every 12 minutes. It's like the sixth part of a slasher film series.
It's very much like, well, we gotta have some idea for Dirty Harry. Well, we got this movie about mobsters. Like, yeah, that's good, but we need to work the women's lib angle into it, or at least some brutality against women. And so, like, well, we got this rape revenge flick left over from 1979 that we never made. Like, it's perfect. Just, Dirty Harry is the glue that's going to hold this together. Nobody cares about the plot as long as he's shooting people and you see some boobs and there's some horrible, brutalizing violence on a couple of women.
Exactly. Hey, Sandra, are you cool to shoot a bunch of men in the crotch? Yeah, no problem. So, because that's what happens. The brutal shootings, as they're described in the plot summary, we'll just get it out now. She blows off the twig and berries and then puts one right between her eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think they called it the 38 caliber vasectomy.
Yes. And that is a good way to describe what happens, because that's the first killing we see, actually. We should go back. She's making out with some guy in the car that we'll come to find out later was one of the rapists. And as she's undoing his pants, presumably for pleasure, she sticks that nickel-plated 38 next to him, pulls the trigger, and then you hear another shot. And we see him, the day later when they're looking at the crime scene, he's one hand on his bloody crotch and then one right between the eyes, and it's and immediately you start to feel like this is going to be a really ugly film, isn't it? This is going to be nasty.
Yeah, and not nasty in the good way.
No,
like it's nasty in the bad way, and then I feel dirty having watched it. But the one good thing is a lot of these scenes are shot in such dark poorly lit locations that all you're seeing is like flashes of terrible 80s clothing and then muzzle flash.
Yeah.
Especially in this one.
Yeah, can I say this? For a movie that's got the budget, this guy was $22 million in the 80s was a lot for a movie like this. And I don't care how much Clint was bringing home of that. Buy a light and hire a gaffer, man. I mean, it is horrible. It is really awful to watch his the poor direction of this, because Clint Eastwood is an acclaimed and is a very effective director. He's directed some fantastic stuff. This may be one of the worst things I've ever seen him shoot. It is awful.
I can only imagine that. Like, was this the first thing he shot? I mean,
I don't think so. No. Let me go back and look and see what his director's filmography is, because I don't have it in front of me. No, the first thing he shot was in 1971. Play Misty for Me, which is fantastic. High Plains Drifter, Outlaw Josie Wells. Those movies look great.
Yeah. So what happened?
I have no idea. That's what I'm saying. Like,
do you think he was just so like exhausted from trying to wear so many hats that it was like the direction is where it suffered?
Maybe so. I think I'm going to go back, though, to something that we both hit already. I don't think the story is good, because, again, the problem here is if you have Harry Callahan investigating this random shooting of this guy that got his balls blown off, and then that leads him to this small town and the rest of it unfolds, that's fine. The mob subplot is what seems ridiculous, because it's the worst contrivance ever to try to get the guy out of town, because that's what happens. They put him on vacation and he still keeps getting chased around by the mobsters. He goes into a hotel restaurant where the guy's having his daughter's wedding or granddaughter's wedding and essentially scares him to death. He gives him a heart attack by telling him he's got some kind of confession in his pocket and walks out the door. And it's one thing after another. Like, he won't go away, so they finally just give him an assignment that'll take him out of town. So, why couldn't you have just pulled him in and said, "Hey, Harry, we want you to go run this one down," and he just goes out of town? That's the other thing. This is the one outside of San Francisco. We hadn't done that with Dirty Harry before. How'd you feel about that? You take your hero, it's like taking Murtaugh Riggs and putting them in Kansas all of a sudden.
Yeah. Or taking Eddie Murphy out of Detroit and putting him into Los Angeles.
Yeah, they did that too. So, or Bruce Willis leaves New York and all of a sudden he's in Washington D.C. Or he's in L.A. and he's in Washington D.C. and Rennie Harlin's directing. You never know.
Yeah, he's such an iconic character, and he's so associated with that 70s San Francisco. I imagine they had to get him out of town because it looked so wrong for him to be there. Mm-hmm. Like, it did not look right for Dirty Harry to be in the 80s, He seemed
like a relic of a time gone by. And that's the thing, is they don't even talk about that. Of all the things he's done as a police officer that we've witnessed, he's still schlubbing around kind of doing the same stuff. Like,
how is he not the most famous cop in San Francisco ever?
Well, he is. They play on that in some of it, just because they talk about, we want you to have, you got to be nicer to people and stuff. He'll become the Hollywood cop next time. That's the next movie, really. But yeah, I don't know how at this point he's not the most famous police officer, because let's just think about it. In the 12 years of what we've seen of Dirty Harry's career in the filmography, he's killed a notorious serial killer that was plaguing the city. All right. He's taken down a gang of vigilante cops that were, while they were murdering criminals, they were, also endangering a lot of innocents and things. And he's thwarted a terrorist group. Now you've got him running around in Podunkville investigating, the 38 caliber vasectomy.
It just, I know they can't continue to elevate. Yeah, at a certain point, it's getting ridiculous. He's not going to be able to kill the entire mob, so why bring the mob in at all? If you're going to bring the mob in at all, you have him scaring that old guy to death as like the capper of that movie. You know what I'm saying? Like, he needs to shoot his way through the mob, sneak into the wedding with all this evidence, and say, "Here you go, old man," and just slap it down on the table, and the old man has the heart attack and falls over dead. Dirty Harry walks out.
and says,
You know,
swell,
that's a great.
and it
yeah.
walks away. Yeah, that would totally work. Or you somehow or another tie this woman into that mob story. Like
Well-
they were all capos or something that did the attack on her and her sister. So if you're going to do that story, you have to tie it together some way.
Well, they attempted that, didn't they? Wasn't the wasn't the lead sleazebag one of the guys who was trying to kill Dirty Harry in San Francisco? One of the just the thugs who got away in the beginning.
No, that was the mobster's thugs. So that's the thing. Mick, the lead slug, basically here is just some random loser. Yeah, essentially. Like you talk about how poorly developed Bobby was last time, or whatever the guy's name was, the head of the vigilante group. This guy gets nothing. We see him say despicable things to people, to brutalize another woman in to the worst love scene. You know what? I take it back. That's the worst sex scene I've ever seen. It beats The Room. So,
I was gonna say.
Yeah, it really does. So you see him do these horrible things. Which, by the way, that was supposed to be Ed Harris, by the way, and he said no. Thank goodness for him. He would have never worked again. So
Yeah, he would have never recovered.
I mean, this guy looks like just if you peruse the local paper of arrests for people like that, sell meth and beat people up for $20, that would be this guy. I mean, he's just a random thug, and the whole gang too. Can we talk about that gang? By the way, the thing is a setup. Jennifer and her sister get set up by you said group of men. There was a woman in there, though she is rather mannish. It's like Stockard Channing's evil twin sister.
Yeah. And also the most developed of the bad guys.
Yeah, oddly enough, she got the most developed until she got shot right in the chest, which was she didn't get it in the crotch, she got it in the chest. So,
But the thing I like is that they established that she's an evil lesbian.
Is that what she was? I wondered that.
They kept mentioning that she was, not, they didn't say the word lesbian, they said dyke, but they kept throwing that out there. Yet all I see is her like sexually harassing men.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. Like she goes after the guy that owns the hardware store now and is the respectable businessman that gets gunned down in his garage, and then the other losers, and except for the cop's son, which we'll find out about him in a little while. But I don't know. The whole gang though isn't as developed. I think the mob people had more development.
Yeah, they for sure did, and they had a legitimate grudge against Dirty Harry.
Yeah, like that is a good story. I'm with you. I really think this story should have been about Dirty Harry versus the Mafia. They've teased that enough, and they do it again here. And why not just do that story? Wouldn't that not have been interesting? I think you could have made a good story out of that.
It would have been better than what we got for sure.
Yeah, the movie takes such a drastic turn when we flip back and forth between the Jennifer plot and the mob plot. Because that's the thing that surprised me is how long that dang mob plot went on. It's like a third of the film, at least, if not half of it.
I mean, if you all right, say you can't afford to shoot in San Francisco, so or they say no because we're tired of watching Dirty Harry shoot people through windows and hate Ashbury. That's fine. Have him send Dirty Harry off to cool out in the small town, and then besiege the town with mobsters and just do like a what's that movie with Sylvester with Arnold Schwarzenegger? He's the old sheriff.
Oh, The Last Stand. Yeah,
just do The Last Stand, or get Harry and his partner, and if you want to keep his girlfriend, that's fine. Mm-hmm. She shows up too, and just do hole him up in the hotel, do like a Rio Bravo or Assault on Precinct 13.
That's what I was thinking, Assault on Precinct 13. And you mentioned partner there. He doesn't have a partner in this movie, and that is a mistake. The Jennifer character should have been his partner. That would have been a great pickup from the end of The Enforcer. The one thing that worked about that movie was the chemistry he and Tyne Daly had. So if you come back 7 years later and you find Harry with this blonde cop that's been his partner for a few years, that I would have bought it. I would have been like, yeah, she looks like she can handle herself. I mean, that works.
Right. And not just a few years. A few years with him is like 15 on the street.
Exactly, yeah, because nobody lives long around him. I mean, that would have been interesting. And so if you have the two of them besieged by the mob, and you just throw that whole rape story away.
Well, I don't want to get rid of Horace, though.
No, I like him too. The guy that has appeared in all of these movies, some raves, the random thugs and pimps and all kinds of stuff. Now he's a friend because he brings him a big shotgun and a bulldog.
Yeah, an unnecessary flatulent bulldog.
Yes, I can only think that Clint just had one of those and said, I got to have my dog in this movie,
Yeah.
And so they just went with it.
The dog makes $25,000 a day.
Exactly. That's why he's only on the. Did the dogs hurt the dog? The dog that is annoying.
The thugs did hurt the dog.
Oh, see, they kill Horace and they hurt the dog. And I honestly think, though, when that scene comes around, and we're skipping around to it, but that's near the end, he's more pissed that the dog's hurt.
That's exactly what it looks like. He comes in, it's like, oh, great, another dead friend. I couldn't tell if Horace was supposed to have been his partner or what. I'd assumed that they were partners because they hang out a lot.
I always read it as he was just another cop in another area that knew him, and they were gun buddies because they were they're shooting on the range together. We have another scene of that.
Yeah. This will take the fingerprints clean off or whatever.
Yeah, let's talk about the 44 Auto Mag. That's a big change in this thing. Dirty Harry's all about the revolver. The 44 Auto Mag, the shortly produced, and because it's too darn expensive, handgun to exist in real life. I remember the first time I saw this, of course, in this movie. Years later, of course, it's a plot point in Beverly Hills Cop 2. Like they basically have the same pieces of dialogue in each movie about the same gun. And I look at that now just as someone who watches a lot of movies and tries to dissect them a little bit in my deconstructionist ways, as the Auto Mag is the way to bring Dirty Harry into the 80s. He's going to use a semi-automatic handgun instead of just the revolver. So that's how we update the Dirty Harry. We give him better armament.
Yeah, and it's a California-made gun.
Mm-hmm.
So it's only natural that it gets moved into, it becomes, if you're going to shoot these movies in California, you may as well use like a California gun. It's chrome. It's got that cool, I don't even know what it's supposed to be on the top, the holes between the barrel and the sight. Yeah, just it's part of the sight profile of it. Yeah, and it does. I don't think it has a functional variance at all. It's just how it was made. So. No, I mean, it's a cool looking thing. It's that long barrel. It looks like a cannon, just like his other one. You know what it looks like? It looks like what Megatron used to transform into until Michael Bay got a hold of him. I think that's what Megatron did transform into. It was either that or he was the P-38. I don't remember which one, but Megatron would look. But I always equated those two things together because having grown up watching the Transformers and then seeing, what Dirty Harry's got in his hands here, I was like, it's like Megatron, But it looks modern. It looks cool, right? I mean, that's what it's supposed to be. You know what it made me think of, and this is another reflection from my childhood. My dad. When his eyesight was better, used to read a lot of those weird pulp books, with like The Executioner, Mac Bolan, or Remo Williams. He used to read all that crap. Yeah, and I just remember Mac Bolan, or the Executioner guy. That's the Executioner, right? Yeah. Anyway, he had a 44 Auto Mag. Mm-hmm. And it was on the cover of every book, him with like the gun, like in the Charlie's Angels pose or whatever. Yeah. And that's just the most distinctive flash of my childhood, is seeing all those weird paperback books that I don't even know if they make them anymore. Oh, they're still around. I don't know if that character's still going or not, but I remember those too. I never read any of them, but I used to be fascinated by those covers because it looked so cool. Because it was like Dirty Harry and James Bond and Rambo jammed together in a suave, cool thing. Yeah, and I don't know that that's not what's influencing some of this too, is the rise of that type of literature. Because this feels like pulp that's being thrown together. This is sort of the seedy stuff you would find in that kind of novel. Except probably not as well written. Probably not. I mean, say what you want to about those assembly line books, and I've read more than my fair share of them over the course of my life, from the Hardy Boys on forward. Is that they're at least consistent, of a consistent quality, easy to read. The exact opposite of this, and that this is completely inconsistent and hard to watch. Yeah, that's the thing, is if you have a simple assembly line plot,
then it flows and it would work. But the problem with this is I'm more interested in this mob subplot, which gets cut off. And then I have to watch the painful stuff of the Jennifer plot, which is awful. I mean, I'm not trying to make fun of anything here or light of it either. Sexual assault is a very heinous crime. It's a terrible thing. And what happened to her and her sister is an awful thing, but it's not good motivation for this. Like, because it puts Dirty Harry in this weird place. It's Callahan on the trail of a vigilante again, but this time it's somebody who's a victim of a sexual assault. So how can he not side with her? You know? Right.
And it's the complete antithesis of what they'd established in Magnum Force. Mm-hmm. Why is it okay for her to do this, to get vigilante justice, and not okay for actual, armed law enforcement officers who have profiled their cases and know who they're killing and can shoot from beyond point blank range? It just seems like it's an inconsistent motivation, and I get that it's a woman, and I think that would make a difference to someone as old school as Dirty Harry. Mm-hmm. But it just seems like it's like they threw it in because they had to pad the film to 2 hours.
Well, I feel like they threw this in for Sandra Locke. They wanted her to be this badass chick that was going to, take revenge for all womankind in 1983. Because what is more, I guess, poetic justice than a rape victim who shoots her rapists in the nuts? I mean, not to put light on it, but I mean, that's what happens. She guns them down by blowing off their male, genitalia, blowing off their manhood, if you will, and taking them out. And feels completely justified in it. And like, it's not like she snaps and is crazy or she's psychotic. She is purposeful. Like, she is plotting. Every one of these are cases of first degree murder.
Yeah, it's completely deliberate and very well planned in a lot of the cases.
I tell you, the most uncomfortable, oddly enough, though, was not the horrible attack scene. It was when they put her in front of her catatonic sister. And that, I don't know who that actress was that just sat there with that blank look, and she's talking about, I've almost got them all, and all this stuff. And I'm like, God, this is just awful. Like, I had a hard time watching it. Like, I really said, I don't know how much longer does this have left in it, because I don't know that I can sit through any more of this. It was uncomfortable. It was awful. It was ugliness only to bring about nausea. I equate it to a lot of what Rob Zombie likes to do. He just never knows when to quit. And this movie feels like that.
But at least when Rob Zombie does it, it's at least interesting to look at.
It can be. It can also be very hard to look at. The shower scene in Devil's Rejects is a good example of that. So, which I've only recently watched that movie, and now I wish I had never had, because it had a lot of parts where I felt like I just wanted to turn away and go and look at flowers, or something. And this movie did the same thing.
But I don't know. In this case, it feels less like a deliberate choice and more like a accidental provocation because they weren't thinking.
Oh, I don't think they were thinking of it at all. You're dead on. Yeah.
Because Rob Zombie's, at least, he's doing this for a reason, and that's because this kind of stuff happened in the 70s, and The Devil's Rejects is his making a 70s movie.
It's him trying to make The Wild Bunch or something like that. That's
right.
This, though, I couldn't tell you what the motivation of this is. Again, other than let's just do what the motivation is clearly the test audiences say they want to see another Dirty Harry movie. Huh? Okay.
And they got this stuff lying around that they're going to combine together.
Yeah. They really feel like it's just microwaved. You remember the early microwaves? This is about the time they started coming out. You literally were passing amounts of radiation through your food that was not healthy. Okay, and that feels like this movie right here. It's just nasty. And let's talk about the random group of losers that Jennifer kills. Okay, we've already talked about the somewhat reluctant rapist who turns into a businessman. He's loading a gun before she shoots him down. That was a really long, weird scene. We've talked about the possible lesbian. That was really awful. What about the chief's son, the chief of police son? His story is the tragic part of this, right?
Yeah, I guess you could say it's tragic.
I mean, it's supposed to juxtapose him next to what happened to Jennifer's sister. Jennifer's sister goes catatonic because of the attack, and it presumably is that way for years and maybe for the rest of her life.
That's what made me think so strongly of I Spit on Your Grave. Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen it?
Yes.
Well, anyway, they forced like a mentally handicapped guy to attempt to rape a woman.
Yeah.
And that's what this feels like to me, very strongly.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I really think somebody saw I Spit on Your Grave and was like, yeah, we need some of that.
I mean, I really think they did, because his story is that he drove himself into like a bridge or something like that and survived the crash, but now was, damaged and in a wheelchair. And you see Pat Hingle. Pat Hingle is one of those character actors that just every time he runs onto something, I enjoy him because he can be fun and he can also be ridiculous, Batman movies, but he can be fun too, like Maximum Overdrive. He's actually one of the things worth watching in that terrible Stephen King cocaine binge. But he is so good in this because he's like, I told you to stay off the crime scene. He's like this Southern sheriff that wound up in San Francisco somehow. I can only imagine Clint was just amused with him. That's why he stuck him there. But he winds up in there. But what you find out from him is because he's portrayed as such a horrible person, that you can't trust because he's trying to block Callahan's every effort. And then you realize why. It makes him a tragic figure. And so when he gets killed, Jennifer doesn't even kill him. It's the Mick guy. Yeah,
and one of his gang who looked disturbingly like a young Dennis Franz.
Well, he kind of did. You're right. Actually, Mick kind of has a little bit of Dennis Franz in the face, and now that you say that, so that's a really strange coincidence. But Mick is the leader of this whole bit, right? And he's the one that gets tipped off that, hey, somebody's taking out the old crew. What are we going to do about it? And I think it's the lesbian lady that calls him and tells him that, right?
Yes.
And so he's like, well, it'll just get handled. And so he just shows up to start doing random thuggery, at different times.
Yeah, he seems to show up when it's convenient for the plot.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like there's any like specific anything for, no real reason for any of this to happen.
He's as cardboard cutout as the targets that David Soul and Clint Eastwood were shooting in Magnum Force. I mean, he really is. He is not even a caricature.
He's just a cackling, insane person.
Yes, exactly. And he looks like he's sweaty and greasy, and
Oh, he doesn't look like he is.
Yeah, stinks of Winston Light.
That's legit. That's a legitimate stink.
Yeah, and Coors. Like, you can just smell it coming off of him when he's on the screen. And this all culminates, though, because
I imagine he smells like an ashtray full of stale beer.
Yes, there you go. That's a great description. This all culminates after Callahan gets beat up by these guys and his gun gets kicked into the river. He goes back to his, place, and his friend is dead. His dog is hurt. He grabs the auto mag. This is the amazing. They ransack his place that he's staying in, the hotel room, and they don't think to look in the drawer beside the nightstand where the, a very expensive, rare firearm is.
Yeah, they somehow
in an unlocked box.
They somehow missed that 50-pound case.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like a block of wood is in there, and they just went right by it. But, of course, it allows him to, Clint to do that cool thing where he's bleeding on his face, and he slams the magazine in, so he can look cool. And we're like, oh, yeah, he's going to get some. And at that point, they've kidnapped Jennifer, and they're gonna have a little repeat of the last time, right? And we go back to the scene of the crime, which is an old boardwalk fairgrounds, right? Which will never let you look at the carousel the same way again. Because
all I could think of was the carousel in The Crush.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, this looked so much like the fairgrounds in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, where our fair was growing up, that it frightens me. I mean, there was a roller coaster that looked like that every year. I mean, it was very awful. So one by one, Clint just shoots people because, you know, you see the man walking down the street that's lit. He's backlit by the light, but he's in shadow. So he's almost like the angel of death coming. They're armed with automatic weapons, and they're just standing there waiting for him to get closer so that his gun is in range.
Right. Well, although to be fair, his gun probably has more range than theirs.
Probably true, but that makes it even dumber that he's just walking down the middle of the street. It's like Clint said, I'm going to do that stuff that I used to do in those westerns when I just walked down the street and shot people because I'm freaking tired of this movie and I want to go home. That was it.
And he was holding the gun sideways so you could see the profile.
Yes, of course, because we got to profile the gun. You know, it's like, no, we got to show the gun. Which, fun story, Clint, apparently the thing would misfire a lot, which is one of the problems with those guns, and he would chuck it in the river all the time. So they had a frogman on standby to go pick it up. So to dive down and go find the gun, dry it out, reload it, give it back to Clint. I was like, you don't have another prop gun? I guess not. Those guns are pretty expensive, so maybe not. But yeah, it all comes down though to Nick holding Jennifer with his shotgun. We get the repeat of the "Go ahead, make my day" line, you know, punk, and Nick's like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And Jennifer headbutts him to give the clearance so Clint can shoot him 4 times. And then he has to fall through a unicorn on the carousel, right? Because he has to die in some overly elaborate way.
Yeah, he shot 4 times. He falls through the roof, I guess.
Yeah.
And somehow is able to land perfectly on a unicorn in the carousel.
See, this is the ridiculous part of this, because the first time he shot Scorpio once in the chest and it blew him off the dock, as it would have, into the water, and he died. Okay, the second time he ran guys off of the pier of the old aircraft carrier, and he karate chopped some dude to death, and he ran over somebody. He didn't even shoot anybody the second time, right?
Right.
Then last time he shot somebody with a rocket. So now you're telling me he can hit this guy with 4 of those, or even 3, whatever. He can hit that guy multiple times with those, and it doesn't blow him off of the one shot, doesn't blow him off the damn roller coaster. That just seemed, again, like overindulgence for overindulgence sake.
Oh, but also we had to hear the electricity crackle so that we knew he also got electrocuted by those lights.
Yeah, because not only is it enough for his internal organs to be disintegrated by those bullets, essentially, but he's also being electrocuted, and he gets impaled. Because I guess there's supposed to be some kind of irony in that the rapist gets impaled in the end. But let me ask you this, though, because of how they had set it up so much, were you a little mad that Dirty Harry had to come in and kill Jennifer's ultimate nemesis, that she didn't get to shoot him?
Yeah, a little bit. I think that would have been not a fun. There was nothing fun about this movie.
No, not at all.
I think it would have been a better ending, at least, because she's already killed like 5 people. Why would she need Dirty Harry's help to kill this guy too?
Right, like she actually got away from him herself. I guess it's because it was 3 or 4 on 1 at that point, and she needed a little extra help. But it does seem to undermine whatever plot they're trying to drive with her, is that she's going to take her own revenge. That Dirty Harry has to come in and give the assist at the end. I mean that's kind of like, I don't know. I always feel like that's how Michael Jordan feels about whatever championship it was that Steve Kerr hit the shot for. So it's just like, that was not as important. So I mean, really, I mean, kind of. It's all like, well, I think, but he does her the solid at the end. Like, I think you'll find that because the guy did steal her gun and had it in his pants when he got shot. So I think you'll find that gun matches all the ballistics, and never mind that he had no reason at all to kill all these people. But whatever. So, oh yeah, well, we're just going to tidy that up since the police chief's dead now.
Well, so. I mean, did you look at that guy? Does he look like he needs a reason to kill people?
No, he doesn't. But I'm just saying, it's like,
or does he just?
That's the thing that kills me, because remember how good we complimented the fact that Dirty Harry actually did real police work at one time in these movies, and now it's every cliche that will be. And that's the funny thing. This is the early part of the '80s, so every cop movie of the '80s copies this crap, and it drives me bonkers.
Hey, Pat Hingle doesn't need no ballistics reports.
Well, he might need for the one for the slug that killed him. I don't know. So, but I think we've put enough rounds in this one. Let's go ahead and do the ending, because that's just what we do. Final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn ratings for Sudden Impact.
Oh boy, I gotta go with a small popcorn. It's bad, but not in the fun way. It's a Dirty Harry movie that really doesn't need Dirty Harry, or it's a Dirty Harry movie that doesn't really need a rape and revenge flick to break out in the middle of it. They tried to combine the two hot things of 1983, the feminist revenge fantasy and the cop vigilante thing, and it just is a spectacular failure. And a waste of Pat Hingle. Although he is good in his limited part, I do like his bluster. Clint Eastwood is clearly in cash a check Robert De Niro in the 2000s mode. And the whole thing just doesn't work in an unpleasant way.
I'm going to join you in the small popcorn. This is such a huge disappointment. And I'll give you two things that really let you know how big of a disappointment it was, or one thing that lets you know how huge of a disappointment it was. If you've ever seen the movie Tightrope, which is not a Dirty Harry film, it came out a year after this, it would have been a much better Dirty Harry. This is such an ugly, awful thing to just sit through. It's not fun at all. And none of the stuff that made the character work before is here. It's just random pieces of thuggery and shooting strung together to try to cash in on something that audiences said they wanted. And, it made money, sure, because I think people generally wanted to see another Dirty Harry movie. But it doesn't hold up, and it doesn't work well at all, particularly having watched these in sequence now. I'd say The Enforcer is at least sort of fun to watch because it's kind of cheesy, than this, but this is nowhere near Dirty Harry and Magnum Force. Not even close. This is an abject failure, and I can see why they, never didn't come back to this again for another 5 years, because this is an awful thing to go on. If this had been the last Dirty Harry film, would have really been a shame, because this is such a dour way to end something like this.
Well, if this was the last Dirty Harry movie, it would have made sense, because this would have officially killed the Dirty Harry franchise.
Yeah.
But somehow they brought him back for a fifth movie.
Yeah.
I guess they decided that, the world needed a 58-year-old action hero before Liam Neeson came along.
I guess so. And it's so funny because Liam is in that film. But we'll get there next time. So we're gonna have some real fun with the Deadpool, I think. But yeah, Sudden Impact is bad. Don't do it. Just turn the other way, folks. We both agree on that. Small popcorn and move on from it. Folks, thanks for joining us on this latest episode of Film Strip. You can find more episodes on our website, continuousplaypodcast.com/movies. Leave us a review on iTunes. Hook up with us on Facebook and Twitter. Let us know what you think. And hey, drop us a suggestion. And people have been doing that on the Facebook page lately. If you got an idea of something you want us to review, throw it out there. You never know. I mean, somebody threw it out on Twitter to us to do House of the Devil, and we squeezed that one in last October in the middle of all that Halloween stuff. So if something strikes our fancy, we may give it a run. So until next time, Ron, I'm Jay. Thanks for listening to Film Strip.
Thank you for listening to Film Strip. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of their respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504C2, Title 17.